Our message title this morning is, Are You Bound by the Past? So I invite each one to consider that question and be willing to open up to receive any areas where we may be bound by the past and it is not serving us. So we're looking today at the idea of breaking free from any ideas of limitation. Troward, Emerson, and Holmes all wrote, "You cannot change a condition with the same consciousness that created it."
I spent a lot of time thinking about this week. I really enjoyed this topic this week and working through it, and it really kind of led me up to this now moment of real kind of understanding of it. But I think I'm going to spend a lot more time pondering on this in the week to come too, because it opened a lot of new avenues for me. So I'm looking forward to that. This now moment, this current experience that we're having, is not a final conclusion. It's not a result. It's not the end of a series, and it's not an effect of past conditions. Now is not evolving. Now that's an interesting idea. Right now, we are not evolving because there is no former entity in the absolute present. In the absolute present, it has nothing to do with the past or the future. It only has to do with the present. So we can't be evolving when there's no past or present, past or future involved in it. It's creating spontaneously right here and now, based on new criteria, not former conditions. Nothing in the past has any influence on the present except within our own old thought patterns, shaping current possibility. Effects do not create, and precedent is an effect, not a cause. Some deep thoughts, huh? There is only one time to experience or influence reality, and that is the present, the here and now. Memories are current thoughts that can only determine current reality to the extent that we give them validity or power, that we let our memories actually control what's happening in the now moment. When we treat attempting to make things fall within parameters of current conditions, we are simply shuffling, rearranging, repositioning current circumstances, not creating a new solution. A solution often requires a whole new design plan, not just a fix or tinkering on existing components. It's like working on my car. Eventually, duct tape and super glue can only go so far. There's a saying that parts is parts, and sometimes we need new parts, and sometimes, we just need a whole new format because it's just not working anymore. Effective creative treatment requires thinking outside the box, is examining a wider range of possibilities. That's what we're talking about.
Outside the box. So in this now moment, precedent being an effect, not a cause, the past is reflected in our present until we change the thinking habit that created it in the first place. So things happen, we think about them, and then we play them forward, and in this moment, if we are still thinking that that is who we are or the way that is, then we are still creating it through a thinking habit. And it shows up in so many ways. I too thoroughly enjoyed this topic this week and also look forward to looking at some of the things that I discovered and uncovered. And I love to share stories, but some of them David said, "Oh honey, that would just be inappropriate to share that." And I was like, "Yeah, but really, it's a really good one for me." And he's like, "Yeah, but not for everybody." So I have
TMI.
One that is appropriate. He keeps me in line. So I have one that is appropriate, and it was a day when my son came to our house to visit, and he brought some oranges. And his wife's family owns an orange farm, an orange grove. And so he hands me one of the oranges, and he says, try it. And I said, well, it's green. It's 100% green. It's not ready. And as we quite often do, we went back and forth. Mom, please, just try it. Honey, it's not ripe. It's not ready. It's green. I'll wait until it ripens, if it does, and then I'll try it. He kept insisting, so I said, all right, fine, I'll try it. Started to peel it. It peeled really easily. Looked like an orange inside. Took a bite, maybe used the word best. It was the best orange I had ever tasted. So I asked him where I could purchase them. And he said, well, you can't. And I said, why not? And he said, because it's green. And I said, what? And he said, studies have proven that people will not buy a green orange. So they are attempting to develop it into an orange, I think. Don't know if I got that absolutely right. But that brings us back to the first statement that I used here. The past is reflected in our present until we change the thinking habit that created it in the first place. Now, it's pretty easy to look at something like an orange and say, oh yeah, well, that wouldn't hurt anything to try it either way, right? Or if I didn't, would I have lost much? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe trying the best orange I have ever tasted. So we each get to look at what things we can wonder about in our own lives that might be ways that we miss out or that we limit the possibilities that are presented to us. And how might we open ourselves up to greater possibilities? Because as Bibi said when she was reading, I know sometimes this is me, and obviously sometimes it is me. I came up with a lot of ideas this week for this topic. And so one of the things that we teach in Science of Mind for how we can open ourselves up is to first give ourselves grace and just begin where we are. That beautiful path that I love to talk about, we're each on a different place on the path, or we're on our own individual path. And it's all the same, yes, but it's not. In humanity, it's not necessarily. In the idea of all that is, it absolutely is. So we begin where we are, and we become more and more aware of the thinking areas and thinking habits, and whether or not they are creating in our lives that which we desire. We can use what I call for myself the catch and check system. The next time we catch ourselves self-judging or limiting, like I did with the green orange, we can catch the thought. We can train ourselves to catch the thought and to change it. And just think what good we might experience as we open ourselves up, what new learning we can have.
Yeah, change your thinking.
A unique concept.
Ernest Holmes says this in The Science of Mind. Suppose I'm confronted with a problem and do not know the answer to it. Every known fact is against the working out of this problem. I say, I wish to treat this solution. I wish to handle it scientifically from a standpoint of spiritual science. My treatment then must not consider the facts. Wow, isn't that cool? My treatment must not consider the facts. The facts are relative. The treatment must be absolute. I wish to get it over into mind as complete acceptance, not of the old fact, but of the new one. The thing itself is not limited. As we have proven that principle is not bound by precedent, we go into the realm that says, behold, I make things anew, not carrying with us the limited belief of the reason why it cannot be. Fascinating idea, isn't it? He talks about facts being relative. Facts are relative, but not relevant when seeking change. There's a difference between relevance and relativity. Facts are related to old conditions, not the new model. So they are not relevant to the current solution. Relative represents things in physical manifest form, things relating to each other in time and space. Absolute represents that which is principle, beyond the conditions or limitations of time and space. That is basically what Einstein was the insight about Einstein's relativity theory, the idea that mass and energy are the same thing. They're not opposed to each other, and they actually have to work together in our sense of reality.
So I like that idea. Don't consider the facts. Our thought must be aligned with the absolute. I honestly believe that the greatest gift we can ever give ourselves is to train ourselves to do the catch and check, train ourselves to direct our attention regularly toward knowing the absolute, toward knowing spirit, knowing perfect life, knowing the goodness of life, knowing that life is supporting us, knowing peace and joy and all the ideas that are of the nature of God. So that if we decide to entertain that idea, we are working to break free from false belief systems that have been imposed upon us by past values, past traditions, past etc., etc., etc. So that idea brought me to some of the things that currently go on in the world that I sort of wish didn't, and to trace back a little bit. What is the cause? Where do these ideas come from within humankind? Because surely they do not come from God. God is the self-givingness of all good to life. And so historically, we understand that Europe, Asia, and Africa had many struggles with power in their early days. I recall studying world history in high school and learning how empires fought each other to increase their land holdings. And I really, although I know I read that it was so that they could be the most powerful, it never made sense to me. How did they figure that owning the most land and owning the most people or controlling the most people made them the most powerful? And they maintained class systems in order to maintain what they perceived as their power. And it absolutely determined for them who was at the top and who was at the bottom. And some believed that they were more important, more worthy. And then we had the explorers. In 5th grade, we studied the explorers who first came to the Americas. And we find that wealthy rulers of countries were the sponsors of their excursions. Magnificent to explore. And yet, what they were looking for, again, was land and gold and silver to accumulate power, not to share, not to enjoy the beauty, but what they perceived as accumulating power. We recently gave a talk about power, and in our Science of Mind teaching, power by definition is the energy by which everything lives. So the perceived fact of some humans is not of truth. It will die away eventually, or it will change form. But we all have a say in that. It is that power, the creative medium. It is the mental law of the universe. And when we think, each one of us, we set that law in motion. So it's up to us to think in ways that set the law in motion for good, for our own personal good, for good for our loved ones, and good for the world at large. We should rather explore for the beauty of nature, to experience that feeling of oneness and awe and wonder when we look, stand on the beach and look out at the ocean, or hug a tree, or stand at the top of a cliff or a bluff and look around and see the splendor that has been created for us. It can even be as simple as putting a sheet in your own yard and just looking up into a tree, into the blades of grass or a flower. There's so much beauty around us and within us. And so it is not for any of us to think that we can attain a superiority. In a world where there is one life, oneness, out of necessity means that we are all equal. No one is more superior or less superior than any of us. And that knowledge, that awareness, stimulates us to live that way.
So you could say that the only superiority or dominion we need to have is over our own thought processes. Physical laws of science or laws of nature are bound by precedent. And that's what they're there for. It's very important in science. Spiritual law is creative. Physical laws of mathematical science are constant and stable. We call them constants because they are reproducible. Every time we use them, we get the same results. If you want stability and stagnation, those laws are applicable to you. However, if you want to grow, they're not. You always do what you've always done, you always get what you always got. And science is great because they always want to get the same results over and over and over again, because that's based on constants in science. Spiritual laws, based on universal principle, are creative, bringing about something completely new and more expansive than expected physical parameters. We will only grow when you're able to release where we are, both physically and mentally, and accept a new path or a new possibility. That may be in an currently unknown direction or mode of development, but as Martin Luther King said, we don't have to see the whole staircase, we just have to take the first step. And that first step is in consciousness. That's how easy it is. Viktor Frankl said, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. That's the only place change actually occurs, is within ourselves. That will actually create conditions around us, effects around us as a result. Edward Teller says, when you come to the end of the light you know, and it's time to step into the darkness of the unknown, faith is knowing that one of two things shall happen. Either you will be given something solid to stand on, or you will be taught how to fly.
Let's fly. So material laws are not what we want to attach our thinking to. Spirit, the absolute, the goodness of life is. Ernest Holmes says it is impossible to divorce spiritual understanding from the proper use of mental law. That's because spirit is us. Spirit is within us. It is that divine presence. And the law is a mechanical force. It is a force to be reckoned with, and we set that force in motion with our thoughts. It can only operate on that which is known. Law can only operate on that which it knows. So in each and every moment, we have the opportunity to know or to know again. Ernest Holmes tells this story as an example of this idea. The electrician may be a Methodist, maybe a Catholic, maybe a Buddhist. He may be a spiritual man or a materially minded man. But electricity, being a natural law, can be used by one man as easily as another. So we have a responsibility to realize that we need not be bound by the past, nor by anyone else's ideas that have played themselves forward, nor by situations or circumstances that appear presently in our life. Because we have the ability to use law to think a new thought, to open our mind to the greatest idea of life, which is the self-givingness of life, to become so completely in love with life that everything around us appears beautiful, becomes beautiful. And we do this by listening to our own thoughts and attaching them to the absolute intelligence of divine loving kindness.
Yeah, creating a new thought. Who'd have thunk it, huh? Ernest Holmes says, because we fail to realize that principle is not bound by precedent, we limit our faith to that which has already been accomplished, and few miracles result. When through intuition faith finds its proper place under divine law, there are no limitations, and what are called miraculous results follow. For those of us who have been in Science of Mind for a while and have practiced this teaching, know that there are actually no miracles happening. We're simply using an unlimited power of universal law rather than a limited capacity of physical law.
So we conclude today with the last line of Tennyson's monologue Ulysses: to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. Let us look for the green oranges in life and not be bound by the past limitations, but press forward toward our highest good through the renewing of our mind. So it's